Hello, this is Kris Nelson from evolveconsciousness.org. I'll be reading an article entitled Amazing Grace, which I wrote and published on the 14th of September 2014. So this is from watching the movie Amazing Grace a few months ago about slavery, domination, and the predator mind virus. This will be another note on the lower will versus the higher will. And Amazing Grace is a movie about slavery. And you can recognize the song Amazing Grace because that song is based on the ship. I believe the ship was called the Amazing Grace. I'm not sure. But anyways, in the story, in the movie, you have the introduction of the captain who was a slave owner who wrote that song Amazing Grace and how he realized the errors in his ways. Anyways, it's a really good movie, and you can see a lot of parallels with how ignorant and how pathetic we are in our treatment of non-human animals. All of human history has been a battle between truth and falsity, good and evil, and I just mentioned that at the end of the previous audio I just recorded a few minutes ago on capital to capitalism. It's all about good and evil, truth and falsity. Or it was on my pleasure gratification life models, pleasure trap life models audio. Anyways, I recorded it today and I was talking about that. So all of human history has been a battle between truth and falsity, good and evil, a battle between the collective, impersonal, higher will of truth, morality, etc., and the lower selfish, individual personal will that holds onto its illusions. Your will is wrong if it violates higher will. Your will is an ego attachment if it violates the higher will. Your will is corrupted when it goes against the higher will. All of history has been teaching us this. It's the whole story of the Bible, and reaping the consequences to actions. Natural law is encoded in history and our everyday lives. All we need are the eyes to see reality, to observe and think about what we see, rather than not think about it or think about other distractions in life. That's the problem. Natural law can be seen in so many ways. Cause and effect has so many dimensions of application. Natural law and morality and the consequences to our actions. It's beautiful once you can see it. But you need to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Because if you're not able to see, it's because you're not aware of it, because you're ignorant, and you're not able to think about these interconnections and interlinkings and correspondences and pattern recognition. Not going to be there. The spiritual axiom of in the world, not of the world, is about having our feet on the ground, doing the work here on the ground, but consciousness being aware of higher will and purpose in life to do the work necessary. To bring about true freedom and peace and true spirituality, and those are completely based on true morality. Natural moral law of the higher will. So previously in some audio I did recently, I was talking about how, on euphemisms and how they mask cloud and obfuscate the truth. I was saying we're to be humiliated by natural laws when we overstep the boundaries of the higher will and use our will as the dictates of what is true and what is right and wrong. And when we go to try to be God, we get smacked back down to the ground. So this is how we're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. We're supposed to be aligning with the higher will, not thinking that we are the higher will as a lower will, as whatever we want to be true is true. We need to align ourselves with that higher aspect, to live in the world, but have our consciousness in a higher elevated state and not in low base earthly consciousness, but in the consciousness of air, the sky and the heavens above. As I have mentioned in my recent presentation of the spectrum of living, spirit, breath, aspire, inspire, and grace are all related terms having to do with God and the good. Spirit is breath, aspire is breathe on or towards, inspire is breathe in. Grace I didn't talk about much in that presentation, but only in passing. Grace is the favor or grace of God, the virtue, mercy, pardon, pleasing and agreeable feedback from the higher will with respect to the action of the lower will we take. What is this feedback? It is the natural law reciprocal feedback system. In this complex force field web of natural laws, the energy we put out is a form of what we get back. So I'd just like to correct, my view has changed a little bit since then. So it is, well, it depends on how you want to read it. So yes, it's a feedback between the higher will and lower will to make ourselves in alignment with it so that we can reciprocally feedback to ourselves in the proper energy we put out, which is of good, truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, to put out in that force of good rather than to put out in that force of evil that we're going to get back as evil. So you put out in good, you'll get back good. So that's how the reciprocation works. It's not that the natural law is going to come back on us because it's its own entity or whatever. It's that it's going to harm us because we harmed others. No, the way we harm ourselves, the way we get harmed is by harming others and not ending evil. That's the collective karma. I just wanted to clarify in case people think, well, there's us and then there's natural law outside of us, but it's not really. It is outside of us, but we are natural law. The force as representative of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, as the true self, higher will, is a transcendental aspect of being that we can embody within ourselves and live in our lives. So that's how we are natural law. That's how we can be truth, how we can be moral, how we can embody aspects of good, aspects of truth, aspects of natural law. But the law that feeds back on us and gives us what we fed to the world is all based on ourselves. We are natural law. It's not like gravity where this force is going to impact you. It's not an actual force. It's not like the weak or strong force. It's not an actual force that there is that will come and smack you down. It's us doing it to ourselves, in essence. We're abstracting and dissociating it from us, just as we do. Well, that's not accurate. It's the way that I can relate it to our own actions is that it is an aspect of us, because natural law does not do it to us. It's not a force that's gonna. We are the force putting out that comes back to us. It's not. We do something and then something stands in judgment and then comes and hurts us because we hurt something else. Or reincarnated and then it comes back to us. No. We do it to ourselves. Anyways, I'll get more into this into the natural law presentation I'll do, but it's an important distinction. How do you get the grace, acceptance, agreeable, pleasing mercy of God? The grace of God is the feedback of acceptance under natural moral law. When a lower will, ego, chooses to harmonize and humble itself under natural moral law, it received the grace of God. Your actions and behavior are in agreement, pleasing, mercy, and virtue of God. However, when a lower will, ego, chooses to violate and overstep the boundaries of natural moral law, higher will, then the grace of God is not received, but instead the wrath of God is received. This should clear up the allegories of the Bible that teach natural law through obedience or disobedience of the law. So it's all a story about some fictional character, called Adonai, Elohim, God, the Lord, whatever. And even if his dictates were wrong, as maybe this story was later changed, I don't know. But it's essentially follow the higher will versus your lower will. So even like the story of Abraham, it was to show that you will follow the higher will and the lower will even if you don't understand it or know it to be right. No, that's not right either. Yeah, as I mentioned in one of my other articles, there's two aspects. There's this aspect of not following the truth and morality and facing the consequences of your actions, which is supposed to be represented by the God figure of what is the law and the right thing to do. but sometimes it isn't the right thing to do, such as the story of Abraham. So this is to objectively determine natural law and not follow authority figures, which is more how I see the Sumerian tales, if they're accurately translated, which I don't think they are in terms of Zechariah Sitchin. But most, generally, sure, the story might be accurate of the domination, control, and how to make humans as slaves. Yeah, well, that's all a story about the validation of humans as slaves and how they need to serve the divine God, the divine will of God as present through the leaders. So that's the bad God, where act ignorantly and just follow the authority figure, follow the father figure, and murder your son just because it asks you to. So no, you're not supposed to do that. So you have to determine natural law, truth, and morality yourself and live in it, not follow the authorities of a higher will. Not follow the will of the higher, well, not higher authority, but not follow the will of the authority that claims it's higher than your own will in society. And to find out objectively what the higher will is. So the Bible is a confusing story. You're not going to read it all in one way to get the truths out of it. It's contradictory and it says different things. In the stories, though, these laws aren't always equated to true natural law. The point is that the story teaches to follow the laws of the higher will, not man's will, not man's lower will of corrupted ideas about natural law. And also, as I mentioned, the authority. You don't blindly follow the authority. That's why those stories, I'm pretty sure they were altered to get people to blindly follow authority. So, look, God said this, you have to fear God, you have to fear the voice of God on earth, which is, the church, and you have to fear, and you have to do what it says, because that's the representative of the will of God on the planet, so you have to do what they say. So then it makes you an order follower, and then you become a slave. So the Bible has freedom encoded in an esoteric manner that most people can't discover, because they buy into the fabricated stories and try to make all the contradictions fit, even though they don't fit, and it just creates a world of bullshit fantasy belief in their minds that they take as reality and they proclaim as the truth, because they're attached to this concept of God, and they have several reasons in their weak mind to require it being valid, such as a greater purpose in life, a devotion to something higher than yourself, a belief in something more, a belief in an afterlife, a belief in heaven, so that you don't have to die, so you don't have to fear death, all these other things, and it's just a bunch of bullshit. Alright, so continuing. So when people violate natural law, that creates friction between the ought, that should be, which is truth level 2, and the is, that we choose to manifest, which is truth level 1. So the friction, when you violate natural law, it creates a friction between those two things, between the higher will and the lower will. What ought to be, truth level 2, truth, love, right, good, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, and the lower will, which is what currently is, that is both good and bad, good and evil, falsity and true. The current condition, everything about it is true, but that it has to be this way is not true. We can change it. And that the evils that are manifesting are not the true way of living. Despite this conflict we create, there is an opportunity for change and betterment from this friction. Friction creates fire, and that leads to lessons learned. Do you keep doing the same thing, or choose a different path to question your convictions? Do you learn from the heat of the friction, from the feedback of what you put out, or do you ignore it and keep doing the same things, never learning from your mistakes? If you receive the grace of God, then you receive the breath of God. You already were inspired to aspire to the breath of the higher will, and now that you attain aspects of the aspiration, you are attaining aspects of the breath of God, bringing that breath into yourself, breathing as one with the higher will of natural moral law, receiving grace of God, with the virtues of life leading the way for rewards, rewards in harmony with truth and morality, rather than consequences as punishment from violating truth and morality. Here is another aspect of the Bible and how it illustrates what I am talking about, specifically with reference to another piece I wrote, Substance versus Appearances. The concept of lust is used often in the Bible to demonstrate a violation of the higher will of God, of choosing lowly distractions that keep you down, rather than the substance and essence that will raise you up. And if you look in the Truth, Natural Law, Heaven and Hell Bible Symbolism one, you'll see this as well. It's the earthly nature, the lower base consciousness, the carnal, beastly, fleshly nature of amoral living and immorality. So in Psalms 106, 14, 15, we have, "But lusted exceedingly in the wilderness, and tempted God in the desert. And he gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul." So you request for something in your lust, so you'll get your request, right? You lust for it, and then you can achieve it. But when you lust for something and you achieve it, you get leanness into your soul. So let's look at the Bible commentaries to understand this. So lusted is for the flesh, for those fleshly, low-base, beastly, carnal desires. It's not evolving consciousness, it's keeping you in low consciousness. So and then we have, but sent into the leanness of their souls. So we have souls into their bodies. So their inordinate desire of pampering their bodies was the occasion of destroying them. So you lust after pleasures, you lust after low base consciousness, carnal, beastly, animalistic, of the flesh, low consciousness. So yeah, you get your request, you lust after it, you seek it, you find it, you attain it, and then that's sent into the leanness of your soul. Sent the leanness into your soul. So you send that corruption into yourself. It corrupts you. It destroys you. So the pampering of your bodies is what ends up destroying your soul. So the attachment to the lower base consciousness, the carnal, fleshly, beastly nature, is what destroys your true self, your higher will and higher self, by living in the falsity of pleasure trap and lower base consciousness and physicality and attachment to the physical. You divide and disunite yourself from the true self and the values and virtues it has. And we have another one from the Cambridge commentary. They complained, "Our soul is dried away." So yeah, your soul. What's the soul? What's the quintessence of man? What's the soul of man? The quintessence? That's the true self. Our soul is dried away. Yeah, your true self is dried away. You dried it away. Our vitality is exhausted. But the satisfaction of their self-will lust brought sickness and death, not life and vigor. So your satisfaction of your self-will lust, all the lower base pleasure trap, carnal, fleshly infatuations, they bring sickness and death, not life. Because when you're in that earth, when you're below the ground, you're in death, you're dead, you're in the coffin, you're in the tomb, and you're blind. So yeah, that's sickness and death, not life and vigor. Life comes from going to the higher consciousness of the air element. So the graves of lust, exactly, you're in the grave because you lusted. You're in low base consciousness of the pleasure trap. You know, obsession with sex is part of this pleasure trap. I haven't talked about sexuality, even in the pleasure. I haven't talked about it much, but that's a major one, you know. The biggest one, honestly. People just want to screw. They want pleasure. So the graves of lust marked the scene of their sin and its punishment. You do it to yourself. You lust after shit. You put yourself in the grave. You put yourself dead. You blind yourself. You poke your own eyes out. And that's your sin, your punishment, is lusting after low base, carnal, animalistic, fleshly, degenerate bullshit. Okay, it's not degenerate, but, well, it is a degenerate when you get too much into that. At first, it might not be a degeneracy, but then you get into moral depravity and degeneracy. So, and then I've partially explained it as I went through these commentaries. I just explained it, and then I have my own written explanation here, so I'll read that as well. So my explanation, elaboration on the above commentaries: lust for pleasure seeking, carnality, hedonism, etc., is all the superficial appearances that hold no significance to live a life of substantive truth and morality, but actually work to impede it. When we demand, lust, to have the distracting modalities in our lives of the lower base natures, we devolve the leanness of our souls into the carnal fleshly state of animalistic instinct and progressively diminish our connection to our higher selves, the authentic, substantive essence of true self, in harmony and unity with truth and morality. Amazing grace. It is amazing indeed, isn't it? If you understand my definition of grace as I've broken it down etymologically. Isn't it amazing? Isn't grace amazing? To receive the grace of God by aspiring towards that potential of the true self, which is the transcendental being of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, source, all one, God, spirit, singularity, infinity, etc. It's all similar aspects, similar words to describe a conceptual framework of something we can't even fully understand, but we can only understand it through its representation of manifesting in aspects of being in our reality that we can see and investigate. So yeah, amazing grace is amazing. When you receive the grace of God, that's the greatest joy you have. That's why I say seeking truth and morality is a joy, because as Gandhi said, God is truth. Doesn't it make sense what I'm talking about in the transcendental aspect of being, how all these things are different aspects of the one thing? Because God is truth, and that is the greatest joy in life, is attaining truth, discovering self-knowledge, the lower self-knowledge about ourselves and of the world around us, and the higher self-knowledge of the true self and morality, and how to create a heaven on earth. That's the joy for me. That's where I get my happiness, is uncovering more aspects of reality in myself and casting away evil and darkness and the shadow and the demon and negative. Alright, let's continue. So amazing grace, it is amazing indeed. If you want to live in grace, in the breath of God, inspired and aspiring to it more, then you need to harmonize with the higher will of natural moral law in the greatest capacity that you can, through observation and thinking, contemplating, reflecting, true meditation. So you can go read my article on meditation if you want to understand what true meditation is, and not the bullshit that's fed to people that keeps them locked into crappy modalities. I'm not saying meditation, the altered form of meditation, is completely useless, but it's not the one that's going to make you evolve consciousness through contemplation, reflection, and thinking. The altered form of meditation is not the right one to evolve consciousness. It can bring healing in your life. Anyways, I'm not going to rant on meditation. There's so much I could say. Go read that article. It's huge. So, harmonizing, aspiring to the grace, receiving the grace, harmonizing with the higher will of natural law is in the greatest capacity that you can, through observation, thinking, contemplating, reflecting, true meditation about your actions in conscious awareness. So if you want to live in the grace of God, you got to do that. You got to seek truth, aspire towards truth and morality, the higher will, harmonize with it, live it. The simplest, most effective way is to admit you are wrong, that you have been living a false way and path, and then find out the right way and path and live it. Many people get the grace of God this way, through finally breaking down their barriers of consciousness that keep them in self-delusion, creating wrongdoings. They feel the friction and learn from it. And they can break away from the carnal, beastly lust into bullshit. That song, Amazing Grace, was made by a slave ship captain who saw the evil of his ways and turned from the lower will ego of man's corrupted condition towards redemption in the higher will. He saw this aspect of his life that was so incredibly false and vile in nature and changed. There were still other violations of natural law going on that are still going on, that people are still involved in, but slavery is a big one to turn away from. Human slavery, anyways. We haven't turned away from slavery. There's still human slavery, human trafficking. We still haven't ended slavery. All we did when we banned slavery in England, in the States, and everywhere, it didn't change people's consciousness. It didn't evolve consciousness. All it did was impose a gradualistic external control. So, yeah, it's to end evil, so I don't really have a problem with putting an end to evil, but you're not educating people to have them realize why they need to put an end to evil to evolve consciousness. And then slavery's still going on. You still have it in black market slavery and all this evil shit. And you still have raping, and we're still enslaving all the other animals and murdering them. So, we haven't really learned much. Gradualism doesn't really help, because it doesn't educate consciousness. It doesn't evolve consciousness. It just imposes dictates and coercions, and you're going to do it or else. Which, honestly, if each of us was acting as natural law causal agents of reciprocity and redress as our own police force, we would all be doing that anyways. We would all be putting down evil, and you're not allowed to create evil in our presence. We'd be putting it down. So that's what the police does. It's just they don't do it properly. The law system does that, but it doesn't do it properly because it does it through a corrupted, centralized authority with special privileges and rights that other people don't have. The only way to make it legitimate is for all of us to have those, for all of us to have the same rights, and not to give people so-called rights that other people don't have, because it's not a right. You're imagining, you're creating wrongs into rights. That's what a justification is. You're justifying right into wrong. And that's what the police do. They justify all their wrongs. They justify it all. And it's not really doing good, because we're not doing it ourselves. We're abdicating our personal responsibility. Anyways, this is all an aspect of natural law and how convoluted things are and how we keep ourselves enslaved. Still today, society is built on the death dealing of the predator mind virus of exploitation, enslavement, harm, violence, or murder of other innocent sentient animate beings. Yes, that is all other animals. Deal with it, you posers and pretenders of moral living. Posers and pretenders of moral living. Frauds, phonies, and fakers. There's a lot of people out there like that. When will we choose to lift the veil from our false ways of living and choose the grace of the higher will of natural moral law again, to take us to even greater heights and raise us above our current failures? The choice is ours. It is all up to each one of us whether we create the true freedom and peace we want. Truth is one way. Go all the way. All. One. Breath. Spirit. God. Source. Singularity. Get it yet? How the truth is love, is good, is right, is morality, is etc.? Do you understand it? Because most of my work is, this is speculative, true, but I include it in 50% of my work because it's how I understand things. So truth is one way. That's right. It's on the one way of the dualistic framework, dualistic conceptual framework. Truth is one way, and evil is the other way. There's no balance here. That's retarded thinking. New Ager, pseudo-spiritual retard thinking. It's all the way. It's one way. Why? Because it's the one thing. It's the all. Truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, source, God, all, one, spirit, singularity. Does it make sense yet? It should. Go through my whole site and you'll understand it. So how to change the world for the better? It starts with you. There's a positive path and a negative path. And it's all up to you. It's all up to each one of us. Everybody on the planet. Every single person. So the positive path. Care for truth. There's the love force, the expansive force of consciousness. Care for truth, seek truth, embrace truth, and then you'll expand your consciousness, evolve consciousness, and that's the force of love. That's the syntropic force of will. So you face reality, accept and embrace what is, and learn and live in the path and way of truth, love, good, right, that ought to be. It's truth level 2. Then we have the negative path, which is apathy for truth, the force of fear, which constricts consciousness, keeps you unevolved, devolved in consciousness. It's the entropic force of laziness. Because you see, when you're constricting consciousness on a lack of truth and morality, it's entropy and stagnation and going to nothingness, to the end of time. So if you don't act, if you don't move, no movement is no time. If you remove time, all there is space and there's no movement. When time stands still, everything's frozen. That's entropy, that's stagnation. It's the opposite of evolution. So it's ignoring reality. Don't look into the animal issue, for example. I deny and reject what is. So for example, on top of that, I deny that we are doing evil against the animal life on this planet, non-human animals. So you ignore it, and then if you don't ignore it, well then you're going to deny that it's even immoral, that it's even evil. And then you continue to live in the false paths and ways of deception invented by man's delusions. So you keep doing evil. Don't look into the animal issue, and if you do, well then you just deny and reject it, and you say it's not evil or immoral, and then therefore you don't need to stop it, and you keep doing it. Welcome to the population of Earth, and how we live our lives. Isn't it sad? So I have a quote from the song. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. So that's just me singing there, just for a little just for singing fun. Anyways, this is from the Amazing Grace song. That is about being blind to evil and your evil ways, and then finally seeing the truth so that you can turn away from that path and change for the better. Only through the vision of truth and morality can we find ourselves, our true self, the higher self. And at the bottom I have etymology links to grace, inspire, aspiration, and spirit. If you want to go look at the etymology, you can click on that. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed this article. This is honestly one of my favorite articles, as I relate many aspects of symbolism in the Bible and how it relates to the higher self and higher will, and how there is many aspects of truth within the Bible that are convoluted and hard to distinguish, but once you have the eyes to see, you can actually discern the truth from the falsity, and you can ignore what is false and only derive what is true, and not be confused and take it all as one big thing and take it all without discernment. As, oh, it's all the Word of God, so I have to accept it all. Well, that's an uncritical, idiotic mind. A religious fool. Alright, thank you very much for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.